news tonight, the U.S. President wraps up a 4-day Middle East visit with a walking tour of the ancient city of Petra after talks with His Majesty the King on regional developments and Jordan's political reforms. The Prime Minister continues consultations to form his government, meeting today with the Council of Professional Associations and the Islamic Centrist Bloc, which holds 16 seats in the lower house. And Syrian dignitaries joined hundreds of people at the funeral of senior Sunni cleric Muhammad al-Bouti, who was killed in a mosque explosion on Thursday along with 49 worshippers. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. U.S. President Barack Obama wrapped up his 4-day Middle East tour with a visit to the ancient city of Petra. On arrival in Petra, Obama took a walking tour of the ruins and was briefed on the history of the city and its significance as one of the world's 7 wonders for Jordan's tourism sector. Obama marveled at the spectacular architecture of the UNESCO World Heritage Site. "This is pretty spectacular and amazing," is how he described the city as he walked through the steep and soaring cliffs. He said he will tell the world it is worth visiting. Obama arrived in Amman yesterday, where he held talks with His Majesty the King on reviving Palestinian-Israeli negotiations, the Syria crisis, and His Majesty's drive to achieve comprehensive political reforms. The two leaders held a joint presser following talks in Humar, in which Obama praised His Majesty's efforts for peace and acknowledged economic burdens on Jordan as a result of a growing influx of Syrian refugees. Obama said he will push for an extra $2 million in budget support to Jordan to assist in meeting the needs of Syrians in Jordan, now reaching 460,000 refugees. On the Palestinian-Israeli issue, His Majesty reiterated that a two-state solution is the only formula for peace and the only way to go. His Majesty the King and Royal Highness Crown Prince Hussein were at the airport to see off the U.S. President. Obama's visit followed a trip to Israel and the Palestinian territories, where he told the Israelis that peace was still possible and assured the Palestinians of their right for independent statehood. Foreign Minister Nasser Judeh and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry held talks on Jordanian-U.S. ties and regional developments. They valued the strong U.S.-Jordanian relations and pledged to further strengthen ties on all levels. They also stressed the need to restart Palestinian-Israeli peace talks, leading to a two-state solution. And in this respect, Judeh highlighted His Majesty the King's continued efforts for peace. The two ministers also discussed the situation in Syria and the urgency to find a political solution to the conflict, one that preserves its unity and security. Kerry said Jordan is a voice of moderation and a key pillar of regional stability, and voiced continued U.S. support to the kingdom. The U.S. Secretary of State, who is seeking ways to revive the long-stalled Palestinian-Israeli peace talks, was to meet Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas here in Amman at a late hour today before flying to Israel for talks with the Israeli Prime Minister. Kerry's meetings aim to follow up on Obama's visit to Israel and the Palestinian territories, in which he called for fresh diplomatic efforts. According to a U.S. State Department statement, Obama promised that John Kerry, who accompanied him on his Middle East tour, would dedicate time and energy to the Israeli-Palestinian problem. The statement said Kerry's meeting with Abbas is to continue the conversations they started with the U.S. President earlier this week. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour met with President and members of the Professional Associations Council, as well as economic figures, part of his consultations with civil society institutions to form a new government. Mansour said the new ministerial team will be selected based on merits and that he will not name his cabinet before completing his dialogue with the various political and social powers. And in another meeting with the Islamist centrist bloc, the Prime Minister said he valued his consultations with the lower house, adding that it reflected the seriousness of executive and legislative bodies towards a new approach to government formation. Ensur urged for an effective parliament and said the state cannot succeed without a successful parliamentary process. The bloc, an affiliate of the Islamic Centrist Party, holds 16 seats in the lower house. The bloc leader Mohammed Al-Haj said the party ran for parliamentary election despite opposing the current law. He said the inclusion of bloc members in government at this point would be difficult and that the bloc's future position will depend on the government's agenda. Hundreds of people, including Syrian dignitaries, attended the funeral of senior Muslim cleric Muhammad al-Bouti, who was killed along with his grandson and 49 others in a mosque explosion in Damascus Thursday. 84-year al-Bouti was the imam of the ancient Umayyad mosque and supported the Syrian president since the start of the revolt 2 years ago. He had a standing throughout the Arab world, but became controversial when he threw his weight behind Bashar al-Assad. The funeral was held with tight state security that blocked roads and caused traffic jams across Damascus. And Syrian officials buried al-Bouti on grounds beside the tomb of Saladin. The decision, however, was met with anger by opposition, who said the choice of burial site was a deliberate insult. On the ground in Syria, rebels seized an air defense base near the strategic Southern International Highway, according to activists. The gain is believed to bolster opposition fighters trying to secure routes to the capital. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said fighters from the Nusra Front, Yarmouk Martyrs Brigade and other battalions seized control of the 38th Division Air Defense Base near the town of Saida on the Damascus-Amman Highway after 16 days of fierce clashes. They said the base commander was among those killed in the 2-week battle for the air defense site in Darab. In Cairo, meanwhile, a group of Alawites who oppose the Syrian president met to support a democratic alternative to his rule. In the first meeting of its kind by Alawites who stand behind the revolt, delegates aim to draft a declaration supporting a united Syria and to invite other opposition groups to cooperate on preventing sectarian bloodletting if Assad falls. The move is led by veteran opposition campaigner Bassam al-Yusuf, a Alawite who spent more than a decade in jail under the rule of the late Hafez al-Assad. He said the group is inviting all the opposition to confront the sectarian problem being ignited by the regime, adding that the last card the regime can now play is civil war and the partition of Syria. Over to Cyprus, and as the country races to satisfy European partners to raise the funds for a bailout and avert financial collapse, Finance Minister Michael Saris said that significant progress has been made in talks with Troika officials. Discussions are underway with the European Union, European Central Bank and International Monetary Fund on a possible levy of around 25% on whole of over 100,000 euros at Bank of Cyprus. The country's bid to avert financial collapse, however, remains unclear after it said it would hold a crucial sitting of Parliament only after finance ministers of the 17-nation Eurozone meet tomorrow. This report looks at public reaction to the crisis.
With a decisive thump of a gavel, Cyprus moves to save the country from bankruptcy. On Saturday, Cypriots and expatriates worried over the future as the nation scrambled to avert financial collapse. Banks have been closed for 5 straight days in the capital Nicosia. This hotel owner says the shortage of cash means people won't be able to pay their bills. Many are also angry about new rules preventing citizens from transferring their funds abroad. On Friday, legislators passed a bill to split the country's banks into good and bad institutions and launch an emergency bonds issuance after rejecting an unpopular tax on bank deposits. But there could still be new taxes on the horizon, prompting British expatriates to vent their frustration.
It's going to be a very difficult couple of years. I don't know if Euro's helping. Was it a good idea to go into Euro or not?
Cyprus's president is set to fly to Brussels for a meeting with EU leaders on Saturday to discuss further measures to clinch billions of euros in bailout cash.
And over to Lebanon, where clashes were reported as Prime Minister Najib Mikati called for a salvation caretaker government to take over. Mikati resigned his post yesterday due to a political standoff with Hezbollah. Local media reported that President Michel Sleiman accepted Mikati's resignation, which came 3 months before a planned parliamentary election. Mikati resigned just 2 hours after a cabinet meeting in which Shiite group Hezbollah and its allies blocked the creation supervisory body for the parliamentary vote and opposed extending the term of a senior security official. And to restore Turkish-Israeli relations, Turkish Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan welcomed an Israeli apology for the killing of 9 Turkish citizens in a raid on a Gaza-bound flotilla in 2010. He said the apology, brokered by the U.S. president, met Turkey's conditions, signaled its growing regional influence. In a phone call with Erdogan yesterday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu agreed to meet Turkey's 3 conditions for normalizing relations. These were a clear apology, compensation to the victims' families, and a relaxation of the blockade against Gaza. Erdogan announced a trip to Gaza and the West Bank next month in an effort to help find a solution to the peace process.
They accepted the apology and compensation. The only part that was not accepted was the embargo. Now, during this process, they accepted the lifting of the embargo, and we even put the line of cooperation with Turkey for relations with Palestine into the agreement.
For the first time in at least 600 years, a reigning pope and an ex-pope face each other. Pope Francis traveled to the papal summer residence at Castel Gandolfo, south of Rome, for a meeting and lunch with his predecessor, Pope Benedict. This was their first meeting since Benedict's retirement and Francis's election. According to the Vatican, the two had a warm and cordial meeting, and despite the number of TV cameras and tourists gazing at the balcony of the residence, neither appeared to salute the crowd. Since his election on March 13, Pope Francis has set the tone for a humbler papacy and has called for the Church to defend the weak and protect the environment. And continuing the humbler papal tone, Pope Francis will hold an Easter ceremony next week in the chapel of a youth prison instead of the Vatican or a Rome Basilica, where it has been held before. Tens of millions of homes and businesses across China turned off their lights for 60 minutes starting at 8:30 p.m. local time in a symbolic show of support for Earth Hour campaign against climate change. In East China's Shanghai, the famous Bund Tower turned off its lights, while the iconic Yangtze River Bridge in the central city of Wuhan was plunged into darkness. Earth Hour, launched in 2007 by the Worldwide Fund for Nature, calls on people, organizations, and cities to turn off their non-essential lights for 1 hour to help protect the environment. Last year, more than 150 countries participated in the event, which saw some of the world's most iconic landmarks, including Sydney Opera House, the Empire State Building, and the Eiffel Tower. Much of northern and central England was hit by late spring snow, causing transport and infrastructure disruption. Tens of thousands of households in Britain, including 44,000 in Northern Ireland, were without power due to the severe weather. Forecasters are predicting more to come. Airports and roads closed while many stranded drivers were forced to abandon their vehicles. More than 90 flood alerts were also issued after heavy rain in the southwest of England caused floods. The prolonged cold snap has raised fears in the British media of the rationing of gas supplies as household demand and disruption to the energy grid close to breaking point. And back here at home, 36 military teams representing 18 Arab and foreign countries are set to take part in the 5th annual war competition organized by King Abdullah II Special Operations Training Center. The competition will start tomorrow and continues until the 28th of this month. The event includes a host of drills such as shooting, counter-terrorism operations, and special operations. Formula One world champion Sebastian Vettel put his Red Bull in pole position for the Malaysian Grand Prix. Although it was a rain-hit qualifying session, the Red Bull's speed shone through. 10 cars in the final round were all fitted with intermediate tires as a downpour soaked half of the Sepang circuit. Vettel will be joined on the front row for the second round of the season by Ferrari's Felipe Massa, with the Brazilian out-qualifying his Spanish teammate Fernando Alonso for the fourth race in succession. Alonso will start in third place. The UEFA Champions League trophy, the most prized cup in the European club play, was displayed in Rio de Janeiro as part of a global tour. The tour will also take it to Africa and Asia next month. Dutch midfielder Clarence Seedorf and Brazil's Bebeto unveiled the trophy for a crowd of young and old soccer fans. Among other soccer memorabilia on display was an Internazionale Milano jersey celebrating the Italian club's 100th anniversary from 1908 till 2008. And also on display was an FC Barcelona jersey belonging to Argentine soccer legend Lionel Messi. UEFA Champions League trophy is one of the most coveted trophies in the soccer world and is a symbol of the greatest achievement in the European game. And finally, to the weather outlook. It continues to be cold and partly cloudy tonight with northerly moderate to brisk winds. A slight rise in temperature is expected tomorrow, but it will remain relatively cold in hilly areas and fair in the Badia, the Jordan Valley and Aqaba. In the Gulf of Aqaba, they should expect moderate conditions tomorrow with northerly moderate to fresh winds and calm seas. Now, as a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here's a reminder of the day's top stories. The U.S. President wraps up a 4-day Middle East visit with a walking tour of the ancient city of Petra after talks with His Majesty the King on regional developments and Jordan's political reforms. The Prime Minister continues consultations to form his government, meeting today with the Council of Professional Associations and the centrist bloc, which holds 16 seats in the lower house. And Syrian dignitaries join hundreds of people at the funeral of senior Sunni cleric Muhammad al-Bouti, who was killed in a mosque explosion on Thursday, along with 49 worshippers. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Alia Tuqan. Thank you for joining us. Have a good night.